And why are we having a dinner party discussion? Well, because we're talking about gene technology and food. And why are we talking about it? Well, because the world's population is expected to grow to 9 billion by 2050. Now we need then to find a way of feeding an extra 3 to 4 billion people. Now, we're going to have less resources, less land, less water, less fertiliser, less fuel, and then you throw climate change into this mix and you can see that we've got a few issues. The impact on agriculture is going to be probably the biggest of any sector, and food security is a global issue. And it's defined as really having physical and economic access to healthy and nutritious food so that people can lead active lives. Now, fuel security also means that we'll be looking at biodiesel, and that's putting pressure on food crops as well. So that's going on at the same time. And in economic terms in Australia, agriculture is worth a combined value of $230 billion. So that's getting close to $250 billion. And a successful agricultural industry contributes to Australia's well-being. Now, agriculture has changed dramatically over the last century, and it will change dramatically over the next century, and that's why we're talking about it tonight. Now, there are different types of farming techniques. We've got permaculture, conventional, dry land, hydroponic. Hope none of you know anything about that too much. Organic, biological, and underpinning all of this is plant breeding. And I've probably left out some other forms of breeding. But anyway, look, the one that we're talking about tonight is involved in a lot of plant breeding, and that is especially at the genetic level, and that is gene technology. Now, during the discussion tonight, we're going to explore what sort of food production systems and technologies we find acceptable. So this is, you're a bit like Julia Gillard's 150, you know, we can solve the problem tonight. Now, so what role, if any, can gene technologies play in ensuring a secure food supply now and in the future? Well, traditionally, Aussie farmers have relied on research and development, and Australia invests heavily in gene technology and research. It's carried out mostly by public bodies such as the CSIRO and Departments of Agriculture and universities, and we've got people from those organisations here tonight.
I'm representing the Safe Food Institute tonight, not Organic Whole Foods. As I've said here, it's established or being established to conduct high quality peer reviewed research to ensure that our future food supply is healthy, sustainable. I'll start my timer too, so I've got 4 minutes from now. Sustainable for our environment, supportive of social and economic systems. We are very concerned about the quality of research, and I'll say more about that in a second. Tonight, I could not help but draw your attention to how tonight has shifted ground. So I was invited here, and it's been mentioned as well, with a broad-ranging discussion about how do we solve the crisis of food production that's coming down the line. And it is serious. It is really serious business. So the invitation was broad-ranging, and it's email there. I liked that email. I said, yes, I'll be part of it. Then we jumped to how acceptable is use of GM technologies to create 3 specific foods that you are going to discuss tonight. I raised the issue that I thought that we should have on this list perhaps a biological product or a permaculture system or some other system of agriculture. Let's have a serious discussion about all of the options, not just a very narrow, limited range of options, which are the 3 that we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm being a little bit controversial, okay? Love you, Craig. Known you for a long time. Craig's actually partly funding tonight, and he represents the national government's view on new and emerging technologies, or works in this way. And we do need to understand who the funding parties are as well. So I'm just drawing this to your attention, and I'm pressing the... Okay. So how do we jump to that? So this is where I'm leading this discussion tonight. It's a pie-in-the-sky discussion. None of these proposed GMOs exist commercially. Whether they do or not is going to be subject to a lot of science and a lot of expense. Do not underestimate the cost of this technology to bring to market. We have seen lots of promises. I call it the mythology of GMOs, you know, feed the world. Drought, solve problems with drought. You know, climate change is going to mean that we can't grow food anywhere. GMOs, hello. Extra nutrition in foods, they'll be putting drugs into foods, vaccines into foods, you name it. In fact, I do believe we'll all be living on the moon one day because of GMOs, because Earth's uninhabitable, of course. Real problems do exist, and this is some of the issues that when we're talking about pie-in-the-sky products, we've skimmed over in our lovely presentation about DNA, the linear model that Watson and Crick proposed. You're all familiar with that. That is a linear model of how DNA is put together in a cell. DNA does not behave in a cell in a linear way. It behaves in ways that we are way short of comprehending. I have a background in biotechnology. I have a 4-year degree of agricultural science at Melbourne University. I got asked to do a PhD at ANU in biochemistry and I turned it down. I majored in biochemistry, so I do understand the technology. We only have a glimpse into how cells operate. The feedback mechanisms are so complex that you cannot for a second think that a linear model is going to explain what we do. And unfortunately, genetic engineering, as I prefer to call it, is cutting and splicing. So going back to these problems, lack of safety testing, we feed it to animals, or companies do, who apply for licenses to sell the technology for a mere matter of weeks, basically to see whether the animals are going to die or not. We're not looking for any long-term disease impacts. Environmental impacts, again, are virtually non-existent in terms of the studies of those. The UK was one of the few countries that looked into environmental impacts. Michael Meacher, the Environment Minister, commissioned that. They found major problems. My time has disappeared. How long have I had? If I had 5 minutes already, I will finish right now with a quote. It is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. Take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. Research is not research most of the time. It is vested interests pushing a corporate, political, profitable agenda.